She said it like she was reading from a lease agreement, not even looking at me, just standing in the doorway of my own kitchen holding a mug I had bought at a craft fair in Asheville 20 years ago, and she said, "Honestly, Evelyn, this arrangement isn't working for us anymore." I was 64 years old. The house was paid off. My name was on the deed, and my daughter-in-law was standing in my kitchen telling me the arrangement wasn't working. I didn't say anything. I turned back to the stove and stirred the oatmeal I had been making, and I thought, I need to remember exactly what she just said, every word, because something in me already knew this was not the beginning. This was just the first time she had said it out loud. Let me go back a little. Not too far, just far enough for you to understand how I ended up here. My husband Raymond passed in the spring of 2019, pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. We had 41 years together. And then one Tuesday morning in April, I drove home from the hospital alone and stood in the entryway of our house in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I did not know what to do with my hands. We had one son. His name is Caleb. He was 36 when his father died, living out in Phoenix with his girlfriend at the time, a woman named Simone. They were not married yet. They came for the funeral, and Simone sat beside me in the front pew and held my hand, and I thought she was kind. I genuinely thought she was kind. They got married 8 months after Raymond died, a small ceremony in Scottsdale. I flew out. I wore the blue dress Raymond always liked. I smiled in every photograph, and I meant it because I wanted to mean it. I wanted my son to be happy. That is the thing people do not understand about mothers. We will rebuild our entire interior world around the hope that our children are happy. The trouble started, I think, when Caleb's company downsized in early 2021. He was in pharmaceutical sales. He had done well for himself, had a nice apartment, 2 car payments, and what I later learned was a lifestyle held together by credit. The way some houses are held together by credit. When the job went, everything underneath it started to show. He called me in March of that year, asked if he and Simone could stay with me for a little while, just to get back on their feet, 3 months, maybe 4. I said, of course. I said, this is your home too. I meant it the way mothers mean things, completely and perhaps foolishly. They arrived on a Saturday with a moving truck, not boxes, a moving truck. I did not say anything about the truck. The first month was fine, the way the first month of most things is fine. Simone cooked dinner twice that week and complimented my garden. Caleb fixed the loose step on the back porch that Raymond had always meant to get to. We watched television in the evenings, and it felt, briefly, like something I had not felt since Raymond died, a full house. Then slowly, the way water finds a crack, things shifted. It started with small things, the way Simone would rearrange items in the refrigerator and not mention it, the way she began referring to our house in conversations with friends on the phone. I heard her once, in the hallway, telling someone, "Oh, we have plenty of room here. It's our place." I stood very still outside the door, and I listened, and I did not go in. Caleb changed too, not all at once. Gradually, the way a photograph fades, you don't notice it happening. You just look one day and realize the color isn't what it was. He stopped asking how I was sleeping. He stopped checking if I needed anything at the grocery store when he went. Small things, the kind of small things that individually mean nothing and together mean everything. By month 5, Simone had begun redecorating. She did not ask. She moved a mirror I had hung in the front hallway, a mirror Raymond and I had found at an estate sale in Virginia, and replaced it with a print she ordered online. When I asked about it, she said, "I just thought it would brighten things up." She said it with a smile that did not reach her eyes. I went and found my mirror leaning against the wall in the garage, and I stood there for a long moment in the dark, and I thought about Raymond, and then I went back inside and I did not bring it up again. I know now that was my mistake, not the only one, but the first one. The debt came out in October. Not all at once. Caleb sat down with me one evening after Simone had gone to bed, and he had the look on his face that he'd had as a boy when he had done something he knew I would not like. Chin down, eyes not quite meeting mine. He told me that Simone had some credit card debt she'd been carrying before they got married. He said it carefully, like a man choosing words from a very small selection. He said it was significant. I asked him what significant meant, and he looked at the table and he said, "Around $240,000, Mom." I sat with that number for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed on the street. I asked him how. He said it was a combination of things, a failed business she had tried to start before they met, medical bills, some personal loans that had compounded. He said it like he was reading a weather report, the way you describe something unfortunate that happened to someone else, something beyond control, an act of nature. I said I was sorry to hear it. I said I hoped they had a plan. He nodded and said they were working on it, and he went to bed, and I sat at the kitchen table until past midnight, and I thought about Raymond, who had worked overtime for 11 years to pay off this house early, who had packed his lunch every single day so he could save, who had died never having owed $1 he did not intend to pay back. And I thought about that number, $240,000. I went to bed. I did not sleep well. 3 weeks later, the number changed. Caleb asked me to sit down on a Sunday afternoon. Simone sat beside him this time. That was new. She had her hands folded on the table like a woman at a board meeting. And something about that image, her hands folded on my kitchen table, put me on alert in a way I could not immediately name. Caleb said there had been some things he hadn't fully understood when they'd first talked. He said the debt was more complicated than he'd realized. He said there were some accounts he hadn't known about. I looked at Simone. She looked back at me with an expression I can only describe as patient, like a person who has already decided how a conversation will end and is simply waiting for the other person to catch up. The real number, Caleb said, was closer to $380,000. I did not react. I have a talent for not reacting in the moment. It is something Raymond used to call my poker face, and something I have come to understand as less a talent and more a defense mechanism developed over decades. I simply sat and listened and breathed, and I said, "I see," and I meant nothing by it. Then Caleb said the thing that changed everything. He said that he'd been talking to someone, a financial advisor, he called him, though I later had reason to question that characterization, and that there was an option. He said the word option like he was doing me a favor by presenting it. He said that if I were willing to refinance the house and pull out the equity, it would be enough to cover the debt and give them a clean start. He said it would help all of us. He said the house was just sitting there. Just sitting there. Raymond had died in this house. I had brought Caleb home from the hospital to this house. I had planted every rose bush in the backyard of this house with my own hands, and my husband's ashes were scattered in the garden by the fence where the light hits in the afternoon, because that is where he used to sit. And my son was telling me the house was just sitting there. I said I would think about it. My voice was level, my hands were still. I said it very calmly, and then I excused myself, and I went to my bedroom, and I sat on the edge of my bed in the quiet, and I thought, I will not do this. And then I thought something else, something colder and more precise. I thought, but I need to be careful about how I don't do it. I called my friend Gloria the next morning. Gloria and I have been friends since our children were in elementary school together. She is 71, sharp as a tack, and her son-in-law is a real estate attorney in Raleigh. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. And when I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Evelyn, you need to talk to someone who knows property law before you say another word to either of them." She gave me the name of her son-in-law's colleague, a woman named Patricia Holt, who had an office over in Durham. I made the appointment that afternoon. I told Caleb and Simone I was going to the grocery store. Patricia Holt was the kind of woman who made you feel immediately that you were in capable hands. She was in her 50s, no nonsense, wore reading glasses on a chain, and she did not waste my time. I laid out the situation. She listened, asked 3 or 4 very pointed questions, and then she told me several things I needed to hear. First, my name was on the deed, and the deed was clear. No one could refinance or sell without my signature and my full consent. Not Caleb, not Simone, not anyone. Second, because Raymond and I had set up a revocable living trust in 2015, something our estate attorney had recommended, mostly for probate purposes. The house was technically held in trust. This was important. This was more important than I had realized. Third, there were steps I could take to protect myself, and she was going to help me take them. I drove home from Durham with the windows down, even though it was November and the air was cold, because I think about that Tuesday morning. I drove home from Patricia Holt's office in Durham with the windows down and the cold November air coming through the car. And I understand now that something shifted in me on that drive that I did not have a name for at the time. It wasn't anger, exactly. It wasn't grief. It was something quieter and more durable than either of those things. It was clarity. What happened to me, what almost happened to me, did not come out of nowhere. I have had to sit with that. Caleb did not wake up one morning and decide to become someone who would ask his mother to refinance her paid-off home to cover his wife's debt. That is not how people become who they become. It happens in small steps, each one made easier by the one before it, each one permitted by someone who loved too much and said too little. I am not entirely without responsibility in that story. I moved my mirror to the garage and said nothing. I heard Simone call my home our place, and I said nothing. I set a pattern without knowing I was setting it, and Caleb learned from that pattern the way children learn from everything their parents do, without announcing they are teaching. That is the part that keeps me honest when I am tempted to make myself only a victim in this story. But here is what I also know. The moment I sat across from Patricia Holt and told the truth out loud, something in me that had gone very quiet for a long time woke back up, not loudly, not with any kind of drama. It just woke up. That version of me, the one who had helped Raymond plan for the future, who had made decisions and kept her own counsel and known her own mind. She had not gone anywhere. She had just been waiting for me to remember she was there. What saved me was not luck. It was that I had spent 41 years building something alongside a man who believed in being prepared. Raymond set up that trust in 2015, not because he expected trouble, but because he was the kind of person who thought clearly about the future, even when the future felt far away. That is a form of integrity that does not announce itself. It just sits there, quietly, until the day it matters, and then it matters enormously. What I had to provide for myself in those months after the kitchen table conversation was the willingness to act on what I knew. Knowing the right thing and doing it are not the same. I knew I should call an attorney. I knew I should not sign anything. I knew Simone's hands folded on my table meant something I needed to take seriously, but knowing is easy. Moving, making the appointment, opening the account, calling Harriet, packing the car. That took something different. It took the decision to treat my own life as worth protecting. 64 years old is not old. I need to say that plainly because I think part of what Simone was counting on was that I might feel too tired or too uncertain or too afraid of conflict to push back. And for a while I was those things, but tired is not the same as finished. Uncertain is not the same as unable. And the moment I stopped waiting to feel ready, stopped waiting for the right time, the right words, the right version of myself, and just made one phone call, everything that followed became possible. Caleb and I are still finding our way back to each other. It is slow. Some days it is very slow, but I believe we will get there, because I believe the person he was before all of this is still in him, the way the person I was before all of this was still in me. People do not disappear just because they lose their way for a while. They just need the people who love them to stop disappearing for them. I am still here. The house is still mine. The roses are coming back in the garden by the fence, right where the light hits in the afternoon. That is enough. That is more than enough.